to them before, seemed to me they have a little bit of well, shipping library, right? But now
Mm.
you in global CCS Institute, maybe it better, I think.
Yeah, we hope so. We hope to get access to more information and to work with them.
I can send some name to you. I
Okay.
used to have some project with them.
Yeah.
You know, that Qatar is a complicated
Hmm.
organization. They have a hierarchical structure. Right?
Yeah.
You have to go up to the top, otherwise nothing happens.
Yeah, I would say in general in the Middle East, you need to approach it from both ways. You need to pick up things from
Well, we have to
down
go
up
see your
and
king. I mean, to make things happen.
yeah.
And it's almost, and maybe we wait for a couple of minutes and then so let other folks join in. So,
Okay.
and we are also broadcasting and then through a way chart and the number, and then generally we get lots of and then audience over there, and then that's the main, and then people in China mainland, and then they are and then watching through the WeChat broadcasting.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe you can put in the play model and then let's get started. And good day, everyone. And my name is Bill Zhen, and I'm a professor at the University of Regina. And together with my great colleagues, and then Dr. Malcolm Wilson and Dr. Python, and then we are organizing this CCUS, a global perspective special seminar series. Today, we are going to have talk 5, and then from Professor Mohammad Zahra, and then Dr. Abu Zahar's topic is current status of CCUS in the Middle East and North American region. Professor Mohammad Abu Zahra joined the Global CCS Institute in January 2022 as head of Middle East North American region, bringing 18 years of deep experience and international expertise in the carbon capture field. Professor Abu Zahra is also an experienced university professor and associate editor for the International Journal of Green Gas Control. Prior to joining the institute, Professor Abu Zahra led and organized the 2021 GHGT 15 conference hosted by Khalifa University and established the first dedicated carbon capture research group in the UAE. He worked as a professor and CO2 capture research leader at Master Institute and Khalifa University from 2011 to 2022. He worked at the International Energy Agency Greenhouse Gas Research and Development Program as a project manager for the capture and integrated system team. Professor Abu Zahra works at the Dutch Research Institute in the Netherlands as a senior research engineer from 2005 to 2009. In his current role, Professor Abu Zahra represents the institute in the Middle East and North Africa region and assists regional stakeholders in establishing their CCS strategic directions. Professor Abu Zahra is keen to educate on the importance of carbon capture and storage technology, as well supports the implementation of large-scale projects and the advancement of carbon capture and storage technology in the Middle East and North African regions. So please join me to welcome Professor Abu Zahar's presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Bill, for the introduction, and thank you all for the invitation for this seminar. It's my pleasure to be here today and to speak to you about the current status of CCUS technologies in the Middle East and North Africa region. So of the presentation, I will like first to give a brief introduction about the Global CCS Institute, and then put some perspective on the global status, how things are going globally, and then we'll dig deeper and focus on the carbon capture and storage in the MENA region. So first, let me also thank the team for providing the translation into Chinese, which I hope will help the audience following up the talk. So the Global CCS Institute, we see ourselves as an international climate change think tank. The headquarters in Melbourne, but we have offices in 7 or 8 different locations. And the most recent one has been the office we recently opened in Abu Dhabi, which I'm heading to follow up on the acceleration and expansion of CCS activities in the region. The Institute is member-led organization, so we have our members from all around the world, and that comes from a government, to global operations, small companies, NGOs, and so on. So we are specialized in the complete chain of CCS or CCUS, and that's all to support the vision of the mission of the Institute, to make sure that CCS is included as an integral part of a low emission future for the energy transition, and to accelerate the deployment of CCS in the region. So these are the offices we have, and again, it's good to mention we are a non-for-profit organization. We work independently, and we serve the members and the stakeholders and communities in the CCS sector. For our members, we currently have over 125 members distributed over all continents. The biggest are coming from North America, Europe, and Japan. We started seeing more and more increased interest over the last couple of years. So every month we add new members to the Institute. In the MENA region, or if we consider the Middle East and Africa, our presence is recent in the region, but we have currently 5 members: Abu Dhabi National Oil Company in the UAE, the Council of Geoscience from South Africa, MaxTube in the UAE, Mid Energy Partners from Egypt, and New Mid Energy from Israel. So that shows the increasing interest in the region, and countries which have not been involved in CCS, they started also showing interest to join the Institute and to become involved in CCS projects. So just to set the floor with some background on why CCS is important and why we all believe CCS should be part of the solution. Fossil fuels still represent around 80% of the global energy mix. Many scenarios have been looking at the deployment of renewable energy, alternative energy, making the fossil fuel cleaner. But still, I think with all the scenarios we have, in a best scenario, renewable energy wouldn't replace more than 40% or wouldn't represent more than 40 to 50% maximum of the global energy mix by 2030, 2050. So there is a need, or there is no option but to continue with fossil fuel, and CCS would be a primary technology to make the fossil fuel cleaner. So CCS is an important, or the drivers for CCS, first of all, achieving deep decarbonization in a hard-to-abate industry. CCS will play a major role there. It is enabling the production of low-carbon hydrogen, for example, at scale with the blue hydrogen, providing low-carbon dispatchable power, and delivering negative emissions when we talk about carbon removal from the atmosphere or BICs or other applications. Over the last years, we have seen the capacity and the announcement of new projects and building new facilities for CCS project has been increasing. So in the year 2021, there have been a major jump. So over 70 new facilities have been announced, increasing the capacity of the overall global CO2 capture and storage to with another 30%. And currently we have more than 135 CCUS facilities globally. So we can see in this figure, which coming from our global CCS report, which we produce annually. And if you haven't seen it, I would suggest to download it from our website, as it contains all the information you need to know about the status of the large scale projects. If you have been in the CCS sector for a while, we all know about the dip that happened around 2015 to 2018, where interest slowed down in the CCS. Number of projects, many projects were canceled at that time, and things were difficult in pushing the industry forward. However, over the last 2 years, especially in 2021, we have seen a major jump in the number of projects under development, and those has been announced to take part of the CCS integrated projects at a global level. The drivers, or for the drivers, this is a map where it shows the current projects. The blue ones are the ones in kind of like advanced development and what's coming up in the coming years. The red ones are the operational. Of course, they vary in capacity, they vary in the sector where they are deployed, and the year of operation. For the sake of this talk, I want to highlight the projects in the MENA region. The first project which has been operational but has been suspended in 2011, and Salah project in Algeria, and that was a project for CO2 removal from natural gas sweetening and then injection in the gas field, and it was operational for over 15 years, and it achieved the project targets and was suspended from the injection. Currently, we have 3 operational projects, and I will talk about them in details later. The Abu Dhabi project, CCS1 in Abu Dhabi, and that's kind of special because it's the first and only operational CCS project integrated with the steel industry globally, with a capacity of around 800,000 tons, and has been operational since 2015. Al-Uthmaniyya project in Saudi Arabia, that's again from natural gas sweetening, and it uses the CO2 for enhanced oil recovery. Both are for enhanced oil recovery. A most recent add-in project in the region is the one in Qatar from the LNG industry, and it start operation around 2020-2021 with a capacity of 1.2 million tons CO2 a year. ADNOC has announced a second phase project in Abu Dhabi, which will come online around 2025. If we look at the summary of projects in the region, still North America is leading with the number of projects has been announced over the last couple of years. Then Europe will follow, and the Gulf Corporation, where we have 3 operational projects and 1 project in development phase. So in global, we have seen some facts or some increase in the number of facilities, over around 71 new facilities added in 2021, mainly in North America and Europe. Some commercial facilities has been announced in Belgium, Denmark, Hungary, Indonesia, and Italy, Malaysia, Sweden. These countries, they didn't have any projects before, and they come forward with announcing some commercial facilities there. A first CCS application, LNG liquefaction, and that's the one in Qatar. We have seen the first direct air capture commercial project in Iceland. First commercial cement facility under construction. So there have been new sectors coming forward and some major advancement at the global level. So what are the drivers for this momentum in 2021 at the global level? strengthening the policy support for CCS. More and more countries came forward with a commitment for net zero, countries and companies, and including CCS in the indices, including CCS in the clean energy policy. That also helped with CCS more projects being developed. The rise of CCS networks and the concept of the hubs also helped, and the collaboration has increased between different partners. Blue hydrogen project has been announced, or the general interest in hydrogen increased, and that helped the CCS. Technology based on carbon removal like direct air capture, emergence of some strategic business partnership globally helped in establishing some more projects in the CCS sector. So accelerators to move more and to see the market advancing. We have seen some of these. We talked about the net zero commitment, successful deployment and operation, and lesson learned from previous projects helped in or encouraged some countries and companies to move forward with new projects. Technologies and cost reduction, some incentives, especially in North America and Europe. We talk about the 45Q, which helped ETS and carbon tax, and the carbon price, which increased over the last year as well. So some industry have seen some incentives for what they are doing. Investor focus, some grants, again, blue hydrogen, and there have been also some push for voluntary carbon markets. But still we have some barriers or breaks that CCS technology is facing. Talk about uncertainties, permitting duration, cost uncertainty when it comes, for example, to monitoring, to long-term storage, and also how the cost can be reduced for the capture technology, for the capital investment. The lack of incentives in many places, mainly incentives now established in North America and Europe, but more need to be seen in other parts of the world to push CCS further. Still, we face issues with the anti-fossil activists or anti-pipeline activists when they link CCS with the fossil fuel and oil and gas industry. So for the market itself, the way we see it forward, there is a need for an integrated system, for an ecosystem to evolve around the CCS technology. And with that, we talk about the development of full supply chain, where emitters, technology providers, the providers for the transport, the storage side, overall management of the project, and then the services need to evolve around the concept of CCUS, like finance, carbon accountant, geoscientists, engineers, lobbyists, lawyers, permit exhibitors. We have seen some new industries coming forward and become more interested in CCS, for example, insurance companies, the finance sector, risk management, logistics, shipping and transportation. So if all of these players came forward and we managed to build this ecosystem for CCS, we will help in the advancement of the technology and we'll see more projects coming forward. And part of the concept of that, the development of hubs internationally for CCUS in different regions in the world. So if we look at the market, we can see in this map where the current commercial facilities are placed. We clearly see some high number in Europe and North America. But I would like to talk about the markets in the MENA region. We have around the Gulf states, where Qatar, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Oman are located. There are major source of emissions in a close proximity to the sinks. There is a potential for CO2 transport cross borders with pipelines or export that with ships. So that region potentially very high or had very high potential as a hub for CCUS and could be a market for the industry. Other location, for example, around the East Mediterranean, where we have Egypt, Israel, and some interest there. And that could become another hub or market in the region with some proximity to Europe. Similarly, with the history in Algeria within Saleh, the close geography to Europe, Algeria and Morocco could also be potentially a future hub for CO2 transport or some activities linked with renewable energy as well. Currently, we know that there are some development happening in South Africa with the project with Sasol, and that could form an initial work happening in Africa as well. So there is some good potential in the region for the market, which could duplicate and copy some models from Europe and North America for actual CCUS hubs in the region. So from our progress report, based on how things have been moving in the CCUS market, there is some definition for some countries at the hot side, the warm, and the uncertainty side for when it comes to CCUS advancement and deployment. Like in North America and some European countries are at the hot side. UAE is overall at the global level considered also at the hot side. Other Middle East countries globally consider at the warm, kind of like a middle kind of scale. There are some projects going on, there are some commitment and promises, but more need to be pushed to see more projects coming forward. If we look specifically at the MENA region, in the MENA region, we have evaluated the potential for CCUS and where the interest is. And that's based on what countries has promised in their indices and the clean energy mechanism. What are the current projects, their involvement with us as a global CCS Institute and other international entities, and how far they are or how fast they are moving with the clean energy deployment in their countries. So the highest potential as we see it lies in 3 countries, in Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Qatar. Other countries like Oman, Bahrain, within the Gulf states, the interest is there. As I said, Oman is very interested in enhanced oil recovery, and we see some potential as well. And they could be part of the regional hub on CCUS, together with UAE, Saudi Arabia, and other countries. Then not far, Israel and Egypt. We have members now from these countries, and they started working closer on getting some CCUS activities in the region. And another driver for that is the fact that Egypt is hosting COP27 this year, and UAE is hosting COP28 next year. So that also support the technologies, clean energy in general, and part of it is CCS. Related to the oil and gas and other countries, Kazakhstan, even it's slightly outside the MENA region, but there is an increasing great interest in CCS technologies as well. So what are the current state for CCS in the region? As I said, we have 3 operational facilities in the Gulf countries. The one in the UAE, in Saudi Arabia, and in Qatar. There have been some announcements in Qatar and UAE to double the capacity and expand the current operation in these plants. Then we have 4 or 5 countries included CCS in their indices under the Paris Agreement, which has been a great push for CCS technology. Another important driver is the interest in hydrogen, clean power generation, and blue hydrogen that are expected to play a major role in these countries and has been a new driver for CCUS in the region. I mentioned COP27 in Egypt, COP28 in the UAE, and these are drivers on advancing some projects around these conferences. And again, we opened our office in Abu Dhabi because we have seen the importance of the region and how things are moving with the development of new projects and getting more and more interest in the region. So what are the drivers in the region? If we want to talk about countries, especially in the Gulf Council region, most of these countries have very high CO2 emission per capita. Small population, high energy demand will end up in a high CO2 emission per capita. This emission is also expected to continue to increase because these countries still developing. More economic and industrial development are expected. Every day we see new announcement for some petrochemical industry and other industries. So there is a need for having a technology to reduce CO2 emissions, and CCS would be there. Many of these countries included CCS in their targets for emission reduction and the indices. And then there is a current interest and future interest in enhanced oil recovery, being an oil and gas-based economy in many locations. Another related aspect is the natural gas availability, which could come from natural gas and from the associated gases. Because currently most of these gases in some locations used to pressurize the oil field, using CO2 for enhanced recovery would release these gases for domestic use. Future plans for industrialization, we have seen that in Saudi Arabia, UAE, so that will result in an increase in the demand. The potential for blue hydrogen together with green hydrogen is also an instrumental driver. Lately also the concept of circular carbon economy, and Saudi Arabia is leading in that aspect, and major part of that is related to carbon capture and removal. So in general, in this region, we talk about high energy demand in terms of power for domestic use, industrial sector, water desalination, and fossil fuel is still the major source of that energy, as we see with some data from the IEA. So there is a need to deploy technology that could make this fossil fuel power generation and industrial operation cleaner. So clean energy and CCUS gaining some more traction in the region. For example, with the environmental aspiration, clean energy technology now more competitive with the right market design, aligning with the global CO2 emission standards. So there have been some desire for future-proof industries against greenhouse gas policies, carbon tariffs, and so on. National oil companies are like a challenge to create new industries. So CCUS, EOR, hydrogen are seen as opportunity for new industries within the expertise and knowledge of the oil and gas sector. The higher confidence in carbon capture technologies, and that's why we have seen more examples coming up in the region. The shortage is natural gas, so CO2 injection could replace that natural gas for enhanced oil recovery. Gas, the cleaner fossil fuel, but also it needs more carbon space, so we need to look into long-term accessibility for gas and cleaner technologies. Then if we look at the various significantly, like the drivers in the region or the MENA region varies significantly from the West. So for example, when talk about the hydrogen production, interest is there, it's growing, maybe not completely mature industry yet, but every day that talks about hydrogen in the region and more announcement related to hydrogen as well. Industrial carbon capture and use, we see numerous number of operation in the region, enhance or recovery. The geology in the region is suitable in terms of the storage capacity and the easy of handling that. And there have been seen major potential for CO2 geological storage capacity within the Gulf countries and in some of the desert area and other for utilization in some of the rock and deep saline aquifers. Still, there is no tax incentives, for example, no carbon pricing in the region. But we have heard last year some announcement from Saudi Arabia where they want to put in place some system for carbon trading in the region as part of their green initiative for the Middle East. So when we looked at the different countries, and this focus on the few countries in the Gulf region, how their interest in CCS in different areas. For example, being an oil and gas based economy in many locations, gas processing for CCUS and CCUS for enhanced oil recovery are essential. And that's why we see high interest in Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, in Oman for enhanced oil recovery, and some moderate interest in Kuwait and Qatar. Gas power CCUS is still low in most countries because we kind of like many of these countries still in the phase of shifting from oil into gas or into cleaner gas with more efficient power cycles. But UAE has put some plans for CO2 capture integrated with the gas power plants. However, on the industrial side, the interest is much higher when it comes to LNG, cement, steel industry, the petrochemical industry. We have seen a higher interest in the Gulf countries with relation to CCUS. So what are the current projects? The first one, I'll present the one in Riyadh project, or the Emirate Steel Riyadh. And that's an operational project linked to the iron and steel industry. CO2 is being transported with a pipeline. Currently, the project is owned 100% by Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, ADNOC. Initially, when it was established, it was a joint venture between Masdar Clean Energy and ADNOC. It's located in Abu Dhabi, starts with Emirate Steel, and then a pipeline transports the 800,000 tons of CO2 per year for onshore enhanced oil recovery at Bab and Rumaitha oil fields in Abu Dhabi. The CO2 capture facility is amine-based solvent, and that's integrated already with the steel production, the direct iron reduction process for separating the CO2 from the syngas within the process itself. In Saudi Arabia, there are two projects. The one I mentioned, Al-Rumayya Al-Uthmaniyya, and that's again for enhanced oil recovery, operational since 2015. The source of CO2 is natural gas processing, transported with a pipeline. Again, is used for enhanced oil recovery in Gawar oil fields. Some of that CO2 is stored permanently. And of course, with enhanced oil recovery, some of CO2 will be released. There is another smaller project with SABIC, the petrochemical industry in Saudi Arabia. And that project is also started 2015. And it's more into producing smaller amounts of CO2 and use that for production of chemicals. And part of the CO2 is even has been upgraded to food grade CO2 and sold as a product. So that's more of a utilization a project rather than enhanced oil recovery or storage. The third largest scale project in the region is the most recent one in Qatar, and that's operational since last year. It is coming from natural gas sweetening with LNG. Qatar Gas and Qatar Petroleum are the partners in the projects, located at Dukhan site, and the capacity around 1.2 million tons CO2 per year. So the CO2 is captured from natural gas and LNG facilities, and then it is injected into Dukhan oil field in Qatar. So where is the potential from some of the analysis, how the capture process will evolve, how aggressive things will become into deploying a carbon capture different industries. We still around the year 2022, where DRI, the direct reduction of iron, the Emirate Steel project, we have natural gas processing, some methanol production. But based on the indications and some of the announcement, it's expected to see more and more projects coming up, and there will be more fields or more industries to join these the CO2 capture large-scale operation. The potential per country is still the current project or capacity installed in UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar. These three countries, the capacity is expected to increase. We have heard the announcement from ADNOC that they want to double their capacity. There was another announcement in Qatar, which was also highlighted by the Qatari Emir, where they said they will double and triple the CO2 capture capacity to reach over 5 million per year by 2030. And the same in Saudi Arabia, they are now evaluating second and third phase of carbon capture integrated projects for Saudi Aramco and SABIC. So based on that, we would expect these three countries to continue leading in the region. And at a later stage, some small potential will come in countries like Oman, Kuwait, and Bahrain, where some CCUS projects might be deployed and integrated in the region. So what are the possible models for the GCC countries when it comes to commercialization of CCS? First of all, handling CO2 as a pure commodity. So a CO2 is being generated in the source and sold maybe for a storage permanently, or maybe transported with a pipeline. So some off-takers for some price and payments will go straight away to the CO2 generator or the source of the CO2. We could think of a model of a joint venture where maybe the CO2 generator can work with the CO2 off-takers, which might be a joint venture there on maybe state-owned. And I think something special about the GCC countries, most of the big national oil company are state-owned. So any advancement of these type of commercial models, you need the support of the state, at least at the start, in the policy decisions, but also to some extent in the financing and to encourage some joint ventures and activities. So this model of joint ventures helped in establishing the first project in the UAE. The Emirates Steel project started initially as a joint venture between Masdar and ADNOC. And that helped overcoming some of the technical and commercial risks and move forward for the project, and proven to be a successful case for establishing a first project in the steel industry and could be followed further. A third model is an integrated project approach where we have CO2 generated from different sources, maybe collected and captured at a different site, and then transported based on the needs and the requirement of the end users. Could be for enhanced oil recovery, for storage, for utilization, whatever the industry needs. It will be a full integrated project, and CO2 can be transported for these industries for their final use. So it's more of like a hub for the CO2 generated for the CO2 capture, and then we have kind of like a map of network to transport the CO2 and use it for different applications. Specific industry models, for example, CO2 to petrochemical. CO2 could be captured on site within the petrochemical facilities, and that amount of CO2 can be transported to the end user, which would be in the same site or integrated within the CO2 generation process itself, and then used for producing chemicals or fuel as needed. Since we talked to academic and research institute, I thought the last two slides, I will summarize the research entities active with some research activities in the region. First, in the UAE, I'd like to highlight Khalifa University of Science and Technology, and specifically the Research and Innovation Center on Carbon and Hydrogen Rich, which I belong, and I was a co-founder for that center. And they're very active in all aspects related to CCUS, from capture technologies development into some activities at the geology and enhanced oil recovery site. Within the UAE University in Al Ain, there's some fundamental research done on membranes and solid materials. In Qatar, there was the popular project together with Imperial College on Qatar Carbonates and Carbon Storage Research Center, which has been concluded. It ran for 10 years, and it focused on geology formation and CO2 storage. Qatar University is working on fundamental research related to CO2 and gas processing. They have a gas processing center within Qatar University, and that center supports some activities related to CCUS. Under Qatar Foundation, there is the Qatar Environment and Energy Research Institute, QERI, and recently they have been involved in the definition of CCUS hub, carbon capture technology selection for the region and for Qatar. In Saudi Arabia, there is a long list of universities active in the field. King Faisal University, they do some work on CO2 conversion, ionic liquids. KFUBM, King Fahd University, they within their CCS center, but also within the geology work and CO2 storage, they're very active in that sense as well. KAXT, the King Abdulaziz City of Science and Technology, they work closely with some international entities on clean energy, and part of it is CCUS. Also, Saudi Aramco has established the Korea Advanced Institute, together with the Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, a joint CO2 research center based in South Korea. And that's part of the commitment and investment from Saudi Aramco for the acceleration of clean energy, and part of it CCUS. And that is focused on evaluating different technologies for CO2 capture. And part of that, they also work on a prototype for a vehicle to demonstrate CO2 capture for a transportation sector. At KAUST, lots of activities, fundamental research ongoing for solid sorbent, nanomaterials, ceramic membranes. And then last but not least, Saudi Arabia, we have CAPSARC, which is a complete research center, and they are heavily involved at the policy and regulation side of the chain. So we work closely with them as a global CCS Institute on the development of CCS related policies, implementation of strategies, and also regulation frameworks. In Oman, Sultan Qaboos University is active in some work related to mineralization and CO2 geological storage and formation. In Kuwait, the Kuwait Institute of Scientific Research, they do some technical work, but they are more involved at the policy and economic aspects of clean energy and CCS. So I think with that, I would like to conclude my presentation. I hope I gave you an idea about the projects, the status, and what's happening in the region. And I will be happy to take questions, comments. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Zahra, and then very, very inspiring and informative presentations. Now let's open for questions. So,
Mohammad? Yeah, thanks, Bill.
Mohammad,
I'm going to be very unfair to you. I asked this question to Tim Dixon as well, and I very much enjoyed the presentation. That's great. I, for one, have been through many cycles of CCS, enthusiasm dying off, enthusiasm dying off. It seems to be a kind of a decadal cycle. So it's sort of two parts to this. One is in your opinion, is this the real one? Are we actually moving forward? And I kind of look at your chart, and I look at the change in the MENA region from 2023 to 2024. And there's a huge projected increase in CO2 capture in the region. Can we do it? I mean, this is the question. This is really asking, as I say, a bit unfair, but asking your opinion. Is this possible?
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I think we all went through these cycles of people getting so excited, and we think CCS is moving quickly. And then it came with big disappointment in many places, at least in the years from 2015, 16, 17. Now, is this the one? I think some indications are better than it has been 10 years ago. I remember when people were so excited in 2009 and 10 about CCUS, most of the things were done at the ballot scale in certain countries, and many organizations and countries were not involved at all. At least in my opinion, we are seeing more and more markets or new markets opening up for accepting CCUS. And I still believe, and maybe I was, when I defended my PhD on carbon capture, one of the committee asked me, where would you see in 15 years CCS being deployed, in Europe or in North America? Then my answer was, most probably it will be deployed first in the Middle East and China before North America and Europe, because the market there might move much faster. And I still believe in that. I think we have an excellent opportunity in these new markets in Middle East, Far East Asia, and China. And the technology advanced a lot over the last 10 years. What we need is a strong political will and policymakers to push for a decision to move forward. And the initiatives, at least talking from what I'm seeing in the region, maybe the targets you've seen in the chart for 2023, 2024 is optimistic, that we will go to this capacity within a couple of years. But I'm confident from what we hear from policymakers and government announcement in the region that these capacities will come, maybe a bit later than that chart. But there is more confidence in this and more clear commitment than before. So this was not the case 10 years ago.
Thanks. It's good to hear it.
Yeah, I think, and then it's like, and then any project, it's like the oil price, and then it goes up and down, up and down.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that at the end, it's a business evolving, and there are many elements will contribute into that. Oil price, gas price, political situation, global issues, and then local and governmental issues will play a role in it. And that's why in some regions things might be easier and faster than others. So hopefully in the region here, with the political decisions and the national oil companies being on board, we will see more deployment of CCUS coming up soon.
Like, and then our follow-up question is like, and then in Middle East, are they talking about like the carbon tax at all, or and then they won't think about it even?
I think still the word tax is not very familiar to use in that content here. People are talking about some incentives for the carbon reduction and some commitment. I don't think in a say carbon tax will be forced. I haven't seen serious talks about developing carbon tax system, but people talking about carbon, more about carbon trading and incentives rather than tax. And again, it is part of the special situation in the countries here, where part of the marketing in the region that we don't have income tax, and the whole concept of economy is going around that. So in my opinion, it will be difficult to come now and force the industry to pay carbon tax. Maybe it is more realistic to go with incentives rather than tax.
Hi, Dr. Zen. There's a questions for Professor Abu Zahra, and from our WeChat platform, by Liam. He just wondering that could the professor advise what's the drive to China's CCS market, or if it is the government policy will be the top initiative or something else. And we are waiting for the answer from our professor here. Yeah.
Okay, so the question about the main driver in the region here.
Yeah.
Yes, I think the main driver so far, the way we see it, is the commitment of the national oil companies and the government, which they both are very well connected. That national oil companies are government-owned companies. The announced commitment has been more of a driving force rather than the policy itself. Like the advancement in the policy and regulation is still not fully mature and needs to come to be specific for CCUS. But the announcement of commitment of cutting down emissions, being in a leadership position when it comes to clean energy and CCUS, these are major drivers in the region. And I think when that will is there and this commitment is there, we will see the policy and more specific regulations around CCS to follow. But also it's good to mention, being an oil and gas economy over the last years, there will be major lessons and copy of policy and operation and regulations coming from the oil and gas sector.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor.
Thank you.
Yeah, and there's another questions in the chart, and then the audience is asking, what are some of the incentives and then you proposed for the GCC to drive forward CCS project? Can you maybe elaborate more about the incentives?
Now, it's still, I think, typical incentives what all around the world people thinking of, like you can subsidize some of the work from these organizations. You find a system for selling their carbon credits when they capture it or remove it, so they get some payments either from the government or the final user. I think maybe subsidy at the start, even in general in the energy sector, people don't like the word subsidy. But I think in many of the technologies, to be successful at the start, you need the state support in any way. It could be a direct subsidy or it could be an incentive where provided to these companies to reduce emissions. Another, like facilitating other business or help with some regional and global business. For example, talking about establishing hub in the region and allow companies to start exchanging credit and transport CO2. That could encourage some companies to sell it. There were also talks about having your product considered as a green. So we'll produce a green steel, a green cement, and even green oil. And that marketing aspect could be an incentive for some companies to put some additional cost to have their steel considered in their country and regionally as a green steel, and will be maybe valued more or at least be recognized within the region.
Yeah, great. We have another questions and then from the chart, that's Jared. Jared, and then can you open your mic and then read your questions by yourself, or you want me to do it?
Yeah, sure. Hopefully you guys can hear me okay. I'm
Yes,
just on my
yeah.
phone.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Yeah, my question was related to the sort of value chain structure you talked about, Professor, JVs and so on. How do you see it evolving here with NOCs, you know, essentially taking the lead, as you said, with government sponsorship and ownership of the subsurface? Do you think they will maintain sort of responsibility and operational management of the entire value chain end to end?
I think if we look at the market, I can start, or still there's some more part to question.
Yeah, or well, basically that was the two options. Do you think they'll control the whole thing and just procure support as needed, or do you think they might farm it out in a more sort of hands-off approach and have companies provide end to end as a an outside party?
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think in my opinion and what we see so far, maybe the first phases of projects would be more controlled by the national oil companies, as most probably the CO2 source will come from their operation, and the sink will go also into the injection well. So they will be the major operator of the project. But as they operate their typical oil and gas sector, they will definitely need the support from other technology suppliers, engineering companies, other sectors to support the whole chain. So if we talk about a single projects coming up, most probably, to make it short, will be controlled within the national oil companies. When things start evolving into multiple projects at a local and regional scale, that will open up more opportunities for more sectors to come. For example, we had some discussion with a small company in the UAE. They want to establish their business about the insurance of the storage site and the pipeline, and they will manage that business, or the long-term monitoring after closing a storage field and seal it up. So things will evolve with the time. Maybe a first phase will not be the ideal integrated model. It could be just one single project source to sink. But when we see more projects, I think it will become a large business, or the business will become large enough for a single national oil company to handle completely. So they will be open for opportunities for other operators and other suppliers.
Yeah, great. And then we have William. And
oh, yeah, hi, Dr. Zain, and hi, Dr. Mohammad. So I just have a quick question, in your slide, diversification of the CCUS, like blue hydrogen production and CO2 capture technology policy, right? All of them. And do you think which section should be focused more, should be invest more, yeah? Because the trend, I want to know the trend, which one we should focus more on study or put more human resource in that.
I think at the end, you need to put a human resource and study on different elements of the supply chain. What's important is to have a successful business case for CCUS. And because we want to prevent going back into frustration and disappointment after this rising in the interest. To keep that, we need to have a successful business case. To have a successful business case, we need to see projects being deployed in larger scale by the push from the companies and the government. Policy and regulation side at this stage is very instrumental to force that. The capture technology is already available in the market. I don't believe that we need another 10, 15 years of research and testing on the capture technology. The same for the transportation and injection. So the pressure should be now not really at the technical side as much as on the non-technical support for the projects and the operation of a successful business case. Successful business case could be by establishing a unique company with a unique utilization option, can generate revenue and then help the source of the CO2 build the capture plant because they will have a revenue coming to them. Maybe getting the government to push some regulations and incentives so the industry will move forward. And we have seen that with the 45Q in the US. Somehow it helped in pushing some of the projects forward. So the message I want to give there is it's good to continue working at the technology and the research, being in a university and research communities, but if we continue doing that with the aim to get CO2 price to $15 and $20 before we deploy it, we will never do that. It will never be deployed. So we need to see large scale projects, and the costs will be reduced by learning by doing, and the technology will become more efficient by learning by doing. And this has been done in many other industries, and CCS is not an exception. I hope that's answered your question.
Yeah, yeah, thanks for answer. But like, I have another question, like, because you said, like, first of all, about the government policy to help the CCUS, right? And because I used to work for one of lithium capture company, and my supervisor, he always comment about like the CCUS. He said, yeah, the CCUS, we will not have future without the government policy or regulation on that. And also about like your comment about like the technology side. And right now I saw a lot of trend using computer molecular simulation to predict almost everything. So do you think the lab experiments still like work, or people can use like the computer to estimate? They don't really need to the lab experiment.
Okay, now let's talk about quickly about the policy. I think we always talk about the need for policy and regulation, but we have to understand that also policy and regulation side are evolving. There have been major advancement in the policy side and regulation side in multiple parts in the world. So people have been tackling some aspects related to policy. Maybe it hasn't been deployed yet as we are hoping for. CCS is not completely part of it as we are hoping for, but there have been some progress made, and that's need to be recognized. Now, at the research side, computers are good. They can help cutting down time and maybe cost, depends on what you're doing with them. But I think at a certain moment, you need to try it in the lab, and you need to try it at a larger scale. What you see in the computer is based on your assumptions and what are the input parameters you added into your model, correct? What if in real life these parameters are different? Then you need to test it in the lab. But definitely these tools are very helpful in getting you things done much quicker, more efficient. But technology at the end need to be demonstrated and seen in actual life, how it will behave.
That's question back to, and then Dr. Abu Zahra's previous position as a professor. So, and then we have, because of the time, we have the last two questions, and then one, and then is asking, do you think is there an average capture storage cost in existing GCC projects now, dollar per tons of CO2?
I don't have an exact figure. I know some numbers have been discussed, but I cannot say any number because I don't have clear number to share. But generally speaking, I think as we all know, the storage side till now is not the major cost barrier in the whole chain. And I think in GCC is not an exception there.
Yeah, and then there's from our WeChat platform, and then there's the question asked, what is the price of the CO2 in the Middle East? And then people is talking about.
Now, the price in terms of carbon price and for selling, or the cost of the technology? Because I think in the Middle East or in Europe, the technology cost will be similar to remove CO2. I would say in average around $90+ per ton. Some other technologies might be cheaper. Then how much a price will be bought per ton CO2? I think that depends on the whole supply chain, how much is available and how much people are willing to pay and what will be the benefits. So if you use it, for example, for enhanced oil recovery, you need to count the revenue and the benefit you are getting from the oil industry itself. So the price might be less than if you will do it for the storage. So it's difficult to have a certain fixed price. We need to look at the whole supply chain, how things will look like in the region and globally.
Yeah, we have our last questions from Sammy. And then Sammy, are you there? And then maybe you can open your microphone and to ask.
Yeah, thank you for giving me this chance to ask this last question. I know you're running out of time. I was just asking from investment standpoint and considering the increasing prices in oil and gas. Most of the speculations says that oil prices will not go down below 100 again. Do you expect the additional savings or surplus in the GCC countries to be invested in carbon capture or renewables, considering that both are very complementary?
I think it will go to both and others. At the end, if we look at the portfolio in the GCC countries, part of the reduction technologies is shift in renewable energy efficiency, nuclear, CO2 capture. So I believe this investment will be distributed in different sectors. And from what we see, part of that, hopefully, as promised, will go to CCS with the announced projects and plans for expansion. Normally, I don't like to put renewable and CCS and other options side by side and start giving preference. At the end, we need the portfolio of solution, and if investment go to renewable, that's good. But we hope that what's promised, at least for the expansion of CCS, it will come forward, so that push the CCS industry and technology further.
Great. And then, so Dr. Wilson, I would want to, before we end, I would want to invite Dr. Wilson for some final remarks.
Mohammad, thanks very much. That was very interesting and very optimistic presentation. So, I'm certainly glad to see things are moving ahead quite rapidly in the MENA region, and certainly hope to see that continuing over the next, decades to come, of course. So, yeah, what I'd like to do is to thank you. That was an excellent presentation, and as I say, really gives us some sense of optimism about what's happening in different regions of the world. And so long as we can duplicate what's happening in the MENA region elsewhere, we'll do pretty well. I'm enthusiastic about the progress of CCS, CCUS this time around. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohammad. And then, so for this very wonderful and then presentations, and then I just went to the WeChat platform and then had a peek, and then we had over 800 people and then watched the presentation. So thank you so much.
Yeah, that's excellent, and really thank you very much for the opportunity, and I hope we will see more and more projects coming up for CCS in the region and other regions, and we'll be talking again in other occasions. And thank you all, audience, for being here and for listening to my presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, keep in touch, Mohammad, and then thanks everyone, and then that's our today's talk, and then we finish this session.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.